Again, good evening to each and every one of you. And I really enjoy the pleasure and even a gift of being able to share the information and the type of information that we're going to be sharing this evening. And so, my whole um, journey of life and my whole thought process, my meaning, my value in my own personal living. After 25 years of clinical experience in naturopathic medicine, being involved in ministry, and my whole passion lies around human well-being and personal growth and development. And what has emerged over those years is a concept I call whole living. And it's all about wholeness because wholeness really is our highest state of being. And it really is also the nature of life and the art of living. And when we go through this evening's presentation, what I want to be at the forefront of it all is experience. Because our journey of life is all about how we experience this temporary journey we have, that one day it comes to an end, but what the experience would have been like is what we want to enhance, is what we want to elevate, and we want to have it to be its best. We have heard it said, there's a saying that says, I'm only human. I'm sure we're all familiar with that. And we usually make a statement like that, um, to justify or to excuse our weaknesses or our shortfalls or mistakes that we make. I'm only human. But if we really knew what being human really meant, that as a human being, we really do have the potential to live super naturally, because being human really is naturally a super quality or a super posture or a existence that is beyond what we really think it is. And so after this evening, perhaps anyone who may have thinking that being human means that it's a reason to fall short, or it's a reason to fail, or it's a reason to not be able to accomplish or achieve our best because we're only human. I want to be able to change that this evening and let us know that because we are human and because of that divine makeup as a human, that we are capable of truly living super naturally. What I also going to be sharing with us is a technology that is extraordinary, that supports optimal human well-being. And so it becomes a bridge that helps us to be able to live at that level of life. And so I'm going to begin by looking at what we have ahead of us. We have made our journey through life to where we are today, and it's a sum total of all the choices that we have made. But the experience of life is experienced based on only two vibrational positions: love or fear. The experience of life is only experienced, or life is only experienced from two vibrational positions, either from love or either from fear. Why is that? Because we have only two natures from which we can live, either our spiritual nature or our physical nature. Whichever one is more dominant is what shapes the perspective by which we look at life. It shapes our perception, how we interpret life, and how our journeys go along. If we go along and our life is defined by qualities of love, our journey of life and our experience of life is one that is more satisfying. It is a life that is empowered, a life where there's growth, abundance, prosperity, a life of meaning, a life of purpose, a life of value. It is a life that very few really get to experience as a continuous, permanent, ongoing quality of life. Now, some people say to me sometimes that in today's world that's not possible, but that's because we think that being human means that we will always fall short. But the opposite is actually true. The other side of it is to go the journey of fear. And when we travel that journey, that leads us to a place when we do get to the finish line of one of regret. And it's a life of limitation, a life of striving, survival. It is one where we are never sure what our potential is, what our purpose is, and we just go about living life as it comes. And for the most part, we go through life on autopilot. We go through life mindlessly. We say things like, I just take one day at a time, I just take it as it comes, as opposed to being deliberate and intentional in creating our lives. When we go the way of love, we create the lives we want. When we go the way of fear, we just react to what life brings into our experience, and it always seems to be an uphill climb or an upstream paddle. And so we want to be able to live on the side of where we live a satisfying life. It's a life of freedom. It's a life of thriving. It is a life of wholeness. And when we live from this position, we are secured in self love. And these are qualities that are defining of this way. We are affirmed in our self worth. We live true to our values, and we are sovereign to our beliefs and our purpose. We are authentic in the way we express ourselves, and we live with an assured awareness. We live intentionally. We live purposefully. On the other side, we get caught up and entangled in striving, fighting to make a living, fighting to make life work, trying to figure life out. We're trying to figure it out, whereas on the other side, there's no need to figure it out. You're going with you flow with the order of life. On the side of fear, it's a fractured way of living, and it is one where self love is really obscured, self worth is obscured, and it's living by the expectations of society, of others. It is conforming to societal standards. It's trying to fit in. It's trying to be accepted. It's trying to be more fit into that mold, and it fosters a more pretensive way of living. And we get entangled with all of the uncertainties of life. It's a life where there is more stressfulness, whereas the other side of freedom is a life of just peace, and joy, and surviving, as opposed to surviving. So we're going to take a look at how we can go down the right road. Because when you look at statistics out there and the statistics across the board, and there are books even written about it, and I'm not going to get into that, is that the statistics tell us that only 5% of people, based on surveys done, when they approach that finish line of life, which we all will get to one day, only 5% of people are satisfied with the way they lived. 95% of us get to that point and we have regrets, not for the way we lived, but for the way we did not live because of our conforming and because of our choices and decisions in life are more fear-based. We'll get to see how that plays out as we go through the presentation. And so we all want to be on the side of living a satisfied and fulfilling life. We want to be able to get to the end of the road. And if someone says, if do you have a chance to live life over again, would you take it? We want to be able to say, no, thank you. I'm quite satisfied with my life. I'm ready to move on to whatever the next transition would be. And so we're going to be looking at that. And so I want to, in light of that, consider this scripture that says, teach us to number our days that we may have a heart of wisdom. That is not about counting the days or the time that you have. That is about being mindful and consciously aware that time is, that life is limited, that life is impermanent, and that we should be mindful that every day that passes, it should be a day where it is lived with purpose, with intention. And so to teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom, the wisdom is that because life is only temporary, We ought to make every effort. We need to be consciously aware, and we need to have the right mind, the right perspective, and the right values, that we live in such a way. This is the wisdom of it, that our lives will be worthwhile and meaningful every day. We can get to a point, ladies and gentlemen, where every day is a good day. And that really is possible. The formula for this is to restore your health so we can awaken our life. Restoring our health is something that is necessary and is something that the entire world needs to look at. This is one of the reasons why I really love sharing these sessions and being involved in the work that I'm involved in, because when we think about health, we just think about our bodies and how it feels and how it functions. But in truth, health is really about our whole life. And our health in the context of our life really does need to be restored, as we'll get to see as we continue through. But if we can restore our health, indeed, we will awaken our lives, and we can live a level of and a quality of life that we have all been dreaming of. So let's look at what the World Health Organization, how they define health. That health is a state of complete physical, mental, spiritual, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And so we have to broaden our understanding and our perception of health just being related to how our body feels and how it functions. It is not merely the absence of disease or infirmity, and many people do think that because they don't feel sick, they mean that they're healthy, and that's very far from true. Health is not, when it's absent, what it is a state of being that is complete, and it encompasses every aspect of our lives, physically, mentally, spiritually, and socially. And so it's speaking about a life of alignment. It's talking about a state of being where every dimension of our lives personally is aligned, and it fits into the social framework in a very harmonious way. That is truly what health is. And when we can learn to live in such a way where we have that completeness, that alignedness, that wholeness of life, truly we will awaken our lives. And so this is more than just the topic of what we talk about. It really is a formula in itself. So let's break that down a little bit so we can bring some more understanding and context to it, that a loss of health is a loss of alignment, which leads to the human struggle. And when we look around the world today, we are seeing the pandemic of human struggle. And it's always interesting to me that we are advancing in technology, in know-how, in knowledge. There's no shortage of it. It's readily available. And despite that, human struggles seem to be getting more and more. So if we break down that definition, physically, mentally, spiritually, socially, and I put economically in there because we cannot separate the economics from the social. We live in a socio-economic structure of life which is inseparable. And so when it comes to our personal well-being of physical, mental, and spiritual, we are seeing across the world that there is an escalation in what we call chronic lifestyle conditions. Over 50 million people a year die from chronic lifestyle disease. And we don't hear about it. It doesn't make news. But when we had the COVID pandemic some years ago, in the 2 years that we were enduring that shutdown, 20 million people around the world die. But we have 50 million people every year dying from chronic lifestyle conditions, but it's not upfront in the news. And the conditions are, and it's getting worse. Cognitive, mental conditions, mental decline is now, according to the World Health Organization, now the leading cause of disability worldwide. It's becoming more and more epidemic. And so when it comes to physical and mental health, and now even spiritual, people lack value, they lack purpose, they lack meaning in life. People are, this whole sense of identity is now becoming an illusion, and people are unsure of who they really are now. In the social framework of things, we are seeing more and more social polarizations, more social conflicts, a lot of conflicts in the family, cultural fragmentation, geopolitical tensions. So on a individual or familial level, right up to on a global scale, we are seeing that on the social scene, in the social framework of life, there's a lot of division and a lot of tension as well. And that all translates into, when it comes to the economic sector of our lives, which is where many of us focus our attention and spend our time trying to gain more opportunities, more money, and we engage our life a lot in this area, and understandably so, because based on how much or how little money you have, it really does significantly impact on how we are going to be able to manage every other aspect of our life, because the social framework is completely undergirded by economics. And so, but what we are not aware of is that we need not be focusing our attention on how to gain more money and look for more opportunities to gain more in terms of wealth and finances. The answer is that we have to back it right up to the beginning. We need to look at our physical, mental, the cycle has to be right. It begins with our personal well-being, who we are, how we understanding our potential, what we are capable of. When we can get the first block right, the social framework will naturally fall in line, and it will naturally overflow into a better economic position. That may be difficult to see at this point in time, because we think that prosperity is something that we have to run behind and chase. We do not understand that prosperity really is an overflow of harmony and balance in one's life within the social framework, that just the nature of that, it can only be experienced. Just the nature of how that works is something that we would have to experience to see that it's really true. But much of our modern life today is lived out of alignment, and it gives rise to what everyone is calling stressful living. Life is a stress. Life is becoming more stressful. But this cycle, we're fractured in ourselves. It affects the social framework. We struggle economically. I mean, most people today are living paycheck to paycheck. Most of us are living in debt. Most of us are financial, and it really is a very burdensome life. But that now cycles right back to where living personally on every level becomes more of a struggle. And so we have a cycle, a fractured living, that is now causing, when we look outside, when we listen to the news, it seems like things are getting worse, things are getting worse. And we're trying to fix the circumstances around us, but it really begins here. And I think the solution, the alignment formula is self-love. It must begin with a love for self. It must begin. Love is the frequency of which the entire universe is held together by. But it must begin with love for ourselves. In order for us to be whole, in order for our mind, our body, and our spirit to be aligned in harmony and balance, where we can live at our highest potential, it must it must begin with love for ourselves. I want to encourage you to even look into that, do your research, and you'll see that one of the greatest deficiencies facing modern humanity today is a lack of self love. It's one of our biggest deficiencies, and it's something that's unaware to most of us. And what's driving it even further down into the hole is this thing called social media and how we get caught up in it. That is another story all by itself. And so I want to just pull it apart a little bit for us to get a better sense of understanding when we look at ourselves as human beings, of a three-dimensional being of body, mind, spirit. I want us to think of it in a more practical sense, of it is you, your mind, and your body. Your body, your mind, and you. And so we are beings of spirit. And this is something that many people are not familiar with. We know what is our body, and we know we can look at it, we can feel it, it's tangible, we can touch it. Our mind, we can't see our mind because it's intangible, but we can actually know its functionality because it's measurable. We can hook up EEG headsets to our brains. We could use MEG technology, and we could see the activity of how our thoughts, emotions, we could see the activity of the mind. So it could be measured. But when it comes to our spirit, there is no way to measure. There's nothing to hook it up to. There's nothing to define it. It is that invisible, animating essence within us. It is that. unseen intelligence of life. It is not a thing, it is a quality of consciousness. It is what gives the very, it is that flow and that essence that aligns with life, that aligns with the very source of life. It is, we can only know it by its experience. And it is that part of us that defines everything that we call noble or pure or life-giving, that aligns with truth, that aligns with harmony, order, balance, that aligns with things like peace, joy, compassion, forgiveness. Those are the qualities of that dimension of our being. And I'm not talking about just emotions, those are the vibrational language of our essence of our being. But we have not been taught of how to think of ourselves as beings of spirit. And while we may be able to identify the aspects of mind through technology and we can see our body because it's tangible, ourselves as beings of spirit, many people do not know how to conceptualize that or even identify it in their actual living experience. But just to simplify it, is that it really is that invisible, intangible, immeasurable part of us that really is the very source of our lives, and it gives that very meaning and value to living. It is where our creativity, it is where our potential, it is where our the source of our what we are capable of doing is where it comes from. It expresses itself through our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions of everything that aligns with truth, of everything that aligns with harmony. It is that part of us, and I'm just relying on this so that we can connect with it. It is that part of us that if we should um, if we forgive someone and release any type of resentment that we have, that lightness and feeling that we feel, that is our essence of being that we're experiencing. When we have to be courageous in the face of some type of major opposition, and we are fearless about it, and we go through, we have that courage. It is that intangible part of us. When we have to um, express love and care for someone who might have done us wrong, that is that part of us that is alive. That is spirit. Spirit is that quality. It is not a thing. It is a quality of consciousness by which that streams through our mind, thoughts, and emotions and define the quality of our lives. And so that's kind of simple way of put it. And so true health is when life is flowing in its correct order, which is from inside out, spirit, mind, body. Consciousness flows through mind, awareness, and into body. And the body is a reflection of all that flows from the inside out. And so the mind is like the bridge, the mind is the conduit between us as a being of spirit and the world around us in which we live and that which we are experiencing life through as living through our bodies. And so health is when the three of these are in alignment. It's alignment. It's like a musical chord. When the three of them play together as a chord, there is harmony, and that's health. When the three of them play as separate notes and not as a chord, that is misalignment, and that creates now struggles. It creates disorder. It creates resistance. There's no longer flow. There's a lot of resistance in the flow, and that really creates our struggles in life. So spirit is really a quality of consciousness flowing through us, and it's defined by unity, growth, and abundance, and it expresses as love, peace, and joy, aligned with the creative source and order of life. As it flows through into mind, consciousness unfolds into awareness. And that gives rise to what we know as mind. And that determines the quality of life according to how the mind, according to what the mind serves, the identity that the mind is served. The mind is either going to serve physical or spiritual identity. So the quality of our life is completely determined on which identity our mind is going to serve. But the mind sets the condition for the body according to how the mind is oriented. The mind is either oriented by the qualities of our true essence, or it's going to be oriented to the qualities of our physical nature based on how we've been conditioned by culture and the world around us. And so when the mind is oriented by our true essence of being, by things that are related to love, peace, joy, when we see life from this inner perspective, everything is going to be defined by unity and wholeness. But this only happens when we actually do have love for ourselves. And when we look into the world, how we define reality is a completely different experience. A completely different experience as day and night when we look from this. And it doesn't matter what's going on around us. We only see it in the context of unity, wholeness, and oneness. That's when we look from the inside. That cannot be known by knowledge, that can only be known by experience. When, however, our mind is oriented by our physical nature, meaning all the data, everything that we've ever seen in our lives, every movie we have watched, every sound that we have heard, every conversation we have had, everything we've looked on the internet, when all that comes through our physical senses that shape and condition our mind, when our values, when our sense of identity and our sense of worth is defined by the world around us, when the mind becomes oriented to that and our sense of identity is locked into that, we see life through a lens that is defined by separation because it's rooted in a life of fear. Once we disconnect from our true essence of being, fear is the natural consequence. We may not think of it, but it is the undergirding quality that defines our life when our sense of identity is rooted in our physical nature. And so that's why we see things as we see a division in everything. It's me versus them. It's I must be right, somebody must be wrong. It is always a conflict because we see life in duality and not in singularity as we do when life is lived from the inside out. This is why when our sense of identity is rooted in our physical nature, we feel like we must always be validated. We must always be recognized. We must always be affirmed. Our sense of worth and value is defined by what we have, what we own, what we're able to accomplish. And if we lose all of that, our whole sense of worth and value goes down the drain because our sense of self is rooted externally. And that's really not who we are. And when we live from this side, life is always an upstream paddle. We're always fighting to make life work, and we're always trying to figure life out how to make it work. Whereas when life flows from the inside, when it's in that flow and harmony with the rhythm and the order of life, you don't need to figure how life works. Life only works for us, it never works against us. Your life is always guided. You don't have to ask for guidance. Guidance is natural. Abundance is natural. Flow is natural. If you want to live your highest and your best life, this is what we have to learn to do that. Now, what we want to be mindful of is that the mind, this is the bridge. Now, it's either oriented internally or it's oriented externally. For all of us, we are born into a world and we are conditioned to we are naturally conditioned externally. This is obscure to us. We really don't have a sense of we don't have a sense of self about that. But that's one of us. If we are going to really live our best life, we have to do that. So restoring alignment means that we have to get the mind set correctly. We have to get good, reset the mind or renew the mind to where it's oriented on values that align with everything that connects with what you call truth or love or self-love. But the language of the mind is thoughts, and that's where it begins. Thoughts are the seeds of experience that mature into shaping our reality. What is our reality like? What do we want it to be? We can create it into whatever we want it to be, but we have to begin here. Now, the quality of our thoughts and therefore the quality of our reality that we experience is determined the source. Now, our thoughts will arise. 95% of it is subconscious and it arises either from our inner self, which is based on love, wholeness, sovereignty, abundance, or it's based on how our minds have been conditioned externally, which is rooted in things like fear, separation, inadequacy, and limitations. However, once thoughts take root, once thoughts arise, they will always take root in the soil of awareness. That is the framework of our mind. Thoughts take root in awareness. That is the bridge between spirit and mind. Awareness is the bridge between spirit and mind. But awareness can become molded to how the mind is set. So once thoughts arise, they are filtered through the perception, filtered by perception through our mindsets, and their thoughts then unfold into emotions as the fruit of our experience. So in other words, thoughts arise. They are filtered through perception. Perception is how we interpret our reality. But how we interpret our reality is based on how our mind is set. And our mind is set based on the values and beliefs and the conditioning that we accept and hold to be true. So when the thoughts arise, they're filtered through, and it happens in a second. It's filtered through our mindsets, and thoughts unfold into emotions, and emotions is the fruit of our experience. The fruit of the emotions are experience. So in other words, our experience, the signature of experience is emotions. Without emotions, there's no experience. Without emotions, we are just a song that can't be heard. So thoughts is what unfold into our experience, defined as emotions based on how our minds are set and how we perceive reality. So that's based on where the mind is oriented. Emotions are the language of the body that reveal the balance between mind and body. This bridge between here, this is what becomes blocked that the light of life cannot shine through. The mind becomes so clouded that the light of life, it meets the clouds and it casts a shadow here. And that's what illnesses and struggles in life translate into. But emotions, they're the language of the body that reveal the alignment between here. As long as we can get the alignment between mind and body to be clear and clean, the light flows through. We don't have to know how to love, how to be forgiven, how to live with joy, how to have peace. What we do need to know is the mind needs to be clear, which means it has to be oriented more towards our inner values. So, but emotions, they are the language that says what the alignment is. But they define our state of being. Health is a state of being. The most important thing that we can work towards in our day-to-day life is to examine what our state of being is. There's nothing more important than that. Our state of being is going to determine what we attract into our lives, and it shapes every aspect of how we experience life. But we want our state to be aligned with the qualities that are of harmony and peace and aligned with the order of life, as opposed to being resistant to that. But this is important because it's at this bridge, the feelings, the emotions that we have is what is now going to determine what choices we make and how our actions. So we want to try to do better, we want to live better, we want to have better attitudes. We want to break free of not being disciplined, procrastination. We want to have our character elevated so we can be more effective in our living. And we're trying to change the end, but we're not changing the very root, the thoughts. Where the thoughts, how the mind is set. The mind needs to be renewed. Our thought patterns need to be remolded so that the whole unfolding of the experience can lead us to where our actions, our choices, our decisions, where our level of awareness is more rooted internally rather than externally. That really is in our workshops, we unfold this. And just to remind those here who are part of the community that this Friday coming up is our session of our workshop coming up on this Friday at 6:30. Anyway, just thought I'd mention that. So this is the formula, this is the way, this is the pathway, this is the process that we have to learn and unfold and bring into a reality of our experience. So we are meant to grow fruitfully and thrive abundantly in every dimension of life because our natural state is wholeness. We don't need to know how to be whole. It is who we are. It is how we naturally are. But we have learned life in such a way that we live fragmented. And every dimension of our being, we're trying to fix mental, we're trying to fix physical, we're trying to fix financial, we're trying to fix our social and relationships, we're trying to fix different areas, not understanding that it is one interconnected and inseparable life that we have. And when one area goes out of balance, it is going to affect every other dimension. It's like a wheel that has 6 spokes. And if one spoke begins to go faulty, the whole wheel starts to wobble. But the good news about that is that when you start from the foundation, when you start to bring things back in alignment, all the rest starts to fall in line the same way. So sovereignty, to have that, we have to be able to come to a place where we have sovereignty over our whole well-being. We have to take that sovereign position. We have to take personal authority and governance over our life in every dimension. But that sovereignty is in our awakened identity, understanding who we are, that just being human is not just means that you're a faulty being. Being human means that we are capable of living superhuman because our identity is what determines our potential. If we don't understand and know who we are, we really don't know what we're capable of. And so when we understand who we really are, we'll get to see what our true potential is, and our potential reveals our purpose. Our reason for being is always locked up. Our purpose is in that. And so identity determines how we would value life and how far we can go. No one can achieve beyond how they see themselves. And we need to be able to get a larger vision of who we are. We need to get a deeper understanding of who we are, of beings of spirit on a journey through this world with a capacity and a potential that is truly limitless. And it's not that we have to go into some far off place to be able to discover this, it is within us. We already have it. But for us to be able to reign in life, we need to develop a perspective that is shaped by a mindset that is rooted in love for self, defined by truth, and aligned in divine order. And that is the framework for cultivating a life of the wholeness of health, where the quality of our living, the standard of our living, and the experience of our life, it is going to be beyond what we call ordinary, normal. It is extraordinary. I would even say it is naturally super. And that's how we're going to be living. So that loss of health, which is losing the flow of our inner power between our mind and our body, which hinders our true essence of our being, the light of life from shining through and from filtering through our thoughts and emotions, that we can live a life that is more noble, more pure, more elevated. And so mind is our focus. It is the central axis of how living is expressed and experienced. It is the gateway to all possibilities. When our mind is properly governed, it is in order, and it's aligned and oriented with our true essence of being, nothing is impossible. Literally, nothing is impossible. But when our mind is in a state of peacefulness, when it's peaceful, which is the vibration of wholeness, That is the language, the vibrational language of wholeness. When our mind is in that state, the body and the mind maintain natural synergy. They come into alignment and it releases the creative potential to live optimally in every area and on every level of life. When our thought patterns and our emotional responses are out of sync with peace, it creates an inner resistance. And it's a contradiction between our authentic nature wanting to flow through and our conditioned self that we are anchored in. And it's a conflict between two vibrational states, love and fear. And this instability, this conflict between the two, creates an instability in the way how we live. It is an inner dissonance, a disharmony that we have. It's the loss of spiritual awareness, where our awareness is anchored into an external reality, and to us, that is truth. And when we hear about ourselves of being a spirit and their qualities within us, we can't touch them because they cannot be known in any other way except to be, they must be spiritually discerned, they must be experienced. And so it separates perception from inherent calmness to life's outer uncertainties, and it creates a double minded state that makes us unstable, and this is what we call stress. Stress is not what's going on in our lives. Stress is not the bills and the lack of money and the people around us and the all that's going on in the world. That is what's happening. How it affects us is not based on that. How how our well-being or state of being is entirely based on us, based on our state of mind and how our mind is oriented. But when it comes to this thing called stress, it starts with this identity crisis of not knowing who we really are. It leads to a fractured state of living, a state of inner conflict or double mindedness, which creates a state of unstable living that resembles these examples here. And these are a few of many of the examples that we could identify with. It is privately experiencing life one way, but publicly we pretend that life is another way. When we are behind closed doors, we may conduct ourselves in a different way. It is projecting self confidence for the world to see, but at the same time, we are disturbed by what other people think about us. It is judging others for improper behaviors while we try to justify our own. It is proclaiming to value the truth, yet we're not being honest with ourselves and with others. It is desiring to be healthy, but willfully unknowingly engage in unhealthy habits. It is resolving to change, to improve, to do things differently, but yet we never follow through. It is thinking one way, but feeling another, saying one thing, doing another. It is living inconsistent, it's a fractured way. It is our well being. How we feel about ourselves is defined by outer circumstances, it's defined by other people's opinions. We're not whole in ourselves. This, once we live like this, once this is our state, we are going to be unstable, and it is going to be impossible to avoid what we call stress, because stress is not the external circumstances around us. It is how we interpret them based by how our mindsets are shaped, and it arises out of how we perceive ourselves and whether we honor or dishonor ourselves. That really is really rubber begins to meet the road. And so we need to appreciate ourselves. We need to love ourselves. We need to honor our lives. We need to no longer say, I want to be healthy, but yet willfully make decisions and choices and engage in habits we do or we don't do what we know we ought to do. It is simple as this. Anything, whether it be interacting with people, whether it be how you treat yourself, every single area of life, anything that we know and we are aware of that is the right thing or it's a good thing to do, and for whatever reason, we don't prioritize it and choose not to do it, as long as we live that way, it is impossible to live a whole life. We will always live fractured. There is no way a human being could be aware of what is the right thing to do or what is the good thing to do, whether it be for themselves or for others, and choose not to do it and not be fractured, which means our whole mind, and to live a stressful life. That's automatic. We would live stressful. And that's important because when we start to live stressful, our physical body starts declining. And when it starts to decline, the more our body declines, the more our mind becomes compromised because mind and body is inseparable. They're not two things, it's one thing that has two functionalities. We just have to understand that. So, if we are going to get our minds oriented right to where it is conditioned by more wholesome qualities, it cannot be done if the body is in this state. If our bodies are compromised with sickness, with disease, if our mind is now being is dysfunctional because of the condition of our bodies, we have to get that right. And all these statistics tell us that this thing called stress it's a global pandemic. 60 to 80% of people in modern societies live in a recurring, almost constant state of stress. 90% of doctor visits are stress related. 75 to 90% of all human illnesses are stress related. Over 90% of diseases caused by stress thoughts and beliefs. Epigenetics declares that. And chronic stress increases the odds of developing Alzheimer's and other mental disorders by 145%. And we're now treating stress like it's now another lifestyle condition where we're now popping pills to try and fix stress. And stress, which is destroying everything around us, is not because of what people say, what somebody said stressed me out, what the boss said, the traffic, the bills, none of that. It's how we interpret all of this because of how our minds are set based on how it's been oriented either towards our true essence, which is inner, or how it's been conditioned by culture and society around us. The wonderful thing is that when we reorient our minds, we live in a world with all its chaos and we're not bothered or disturbed by it. In fact, we don't even perceive it in that way. And despite all the chaos, we still flow with meaning, with grace, with prosperity in ways that people around us wondering, how is it working for you? You see? But when life is a fight, when it's on the other side, we get to the end one day and we wish, then as the finish line draws closer, we look back and we wish that we start to see what really matters. And that what really matters is what you can't put your hand on, what you can't scan, what you can't see. What really matters is really what's inside. What really matters are those intangible and noble qualities that come from our true essence of being as beings of spirit. And so it's important for us to really be able to put it together so we can really begin to make the changes that between our mind and body, it translates through the central nervous system into the conditions that diminishes our physical capacities. We age faster, we develop disease younger, and you're seeing a pandemic of it. And the central nervous system, which is really the brain, the operating system of the mind, and all the nerves that run through the entire body, that is the connection. The central nervous system is the bridge between mind and body, where it comes out of that intangible realm into tangible form. And it happens through the central nervous system, which extends into what they call the autonomic nervous system, and it controls all the functions of our bodies. It has two branches to this. This is important. No, and I'm saying this is important because I want us to get this point. When things start to dysfunction in our bodies, even if it's something as simple as energy, I'm lacking energy, I don't have enough energy, whether it's aches or pains, whether it is any type of chronic diagnosis we get of any what we call lifestyle conditions, I want us to understand that those are just expressions of the imbalance between mind and body. It is not a dysfunction of the body, it's a dysfunction of flow between mind and body. And we'll get to understand that more and more, particularly those of us who are engaging in our workshops. So the first of the two branches of the autonomic nervous system is the sympathetic system that deals with stress response. This is what we call our fight or flight or freeze response. This is a part of the nervous system that kicks in when there is stress. It is part of our survival mechanism. It kicks in when there's an emergency or there's need for quick action. It kicks in for our survival and then it settles right back down, or it's supposed to settle right back down. But most people, we are living in a chronic state of sympathetic dominance, and it even happens while we're sleeping. And all the medical literature tells us that no lifestyle disease emanates and develops and matures within the body except there is constant oxidation and chronic inflammation. That is the seedbed from which all chronic lifestyle conditions will spring. Chronic, ongoing oxidation and inflammation. And that happens as long as there is sympathetic dominance in our nervous system, and it happens over time. It's a slow spiral. And it starts with your body just don't have enough energy. And when that happens, they find that your mind is not as sharp. Your capacity to multitask, you're not as quick, and there's a slow decline. And then we just say, I guess I'm just getting old. It's not age. It's the condition that happened. And along the way, everything works together. It's how we feel, it's how we think, it's how we interact with life, but it all comes down to one thing: how the mind is oriented. The second arm of the autonomic nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system, and this one deals with healing and recovery. This one kicks in when the mind is in harmony and when the mind is in balance, when the mind is governed more by order and peace. When the mind is in this state, it activates and it stimulates homeostasis, immune response. The body heals, it repairs. All systems are well coordinated, a well-oiled system, as they say. So this is consistent with when the mind is oriented in the right place. There's always that harmony, there's always that balance, there's a state of mind. And there's a phenomenon in medicine, they call it spontaneous healing or spontaneous remission, where people mysteriously, in the eyes of medicine, recover from incurable conditions and terminal conditions without any medical intervention. They just recover from it. And it's good, they call it spontaneous remission, which in medical terms have no explanation. But what they do know is that when there's parasympathetic dominance, that begins to happen. Now, and that's why, so it's not just our body begins to feel and function better and it recovers from illness when there's parasympathetic dominance, but it also finds that our relationships and our effectiveness in living is across the board. This is just one way it is expressed. And we can tell which is dominant by doing EEG scans. So we can now tell what the state of the mind is when we hook up headsets and we look, because brain waves is what measures our state of mind. And that's where we can now see and where we can learn how to adjust. Well, what they have found is that when brain waves reflect inner harmony, which is defined by parasympathetic dominance, when there's frequencies of love, joy, gratitude, when that is what is defining the state, there is parasympathetic dominance. Everything functions in harmony. Everything is in balance. The body recovers from illness. But when brain waves reflect that inner dissonance, when there's that inner discord, when there's that inner conflict, when there's that disturbance because there's negative frequencies, fear, worry, anxiety, resentment, etc., there's all the sympathetic system is always dominant. You're always in a survival mode. And so there's always inflammation. There's always this low-grade inflammation, and sometimes it speaks and sometimes it doesn't. And it goes on and it spirals our life down. Meantime, we struggle and we fight with life. The solution is that we have to reconstruct wholeness. And restoring a life of wholeness, we cannot regain spiritual awareness, to reorient our minds correctly while we are enslaved to physical disorder. So we have to gain our sovereignty, must begin by gaining dominance over our physical well-being. And once we start doing that, our mind starts begin to settle when the body starts to become more balanced. Then we start to gain more we start to feed the body, we start now to input more truth-centered data into our minds, new data, and we leave out some of the old data. And we start to cultivate that spiritual awareness, have more resonance. It's a whole process that we go through, but it brings us into more harmony, more balance, more wholeness. We feel better. We feel better about ourselves. We start to love ourselves. Our body starts to work better. Our mind starts to become clearer. We start to have better relationships. This is the journey. It is our state. It's a state of being where who we are becomes clearer. What we believe and how we live, it becomes one and the same. That's alignment. And our thoughts, our emotions, our words is all expressed in a singularity, and it's always on the side of goodness, never on the side of conflict, never on the side of stress. Is it possible? Absolutely. Why? We are built that way. That's our natural design. We have just learned it another way. So there's some unlearning and relearning to be done. But here's the key. Alignment is what we want. Alignment creates a state of mind that is in harmony, and that synchronizes brain waves into coherence, and it resets the central nervous system back to its optimal function. What does that mean? It means that life is being defined by a state of mind that is more in harmony, which is now the light of life. Now there's no more clouds. There's no more clouds. And this is where we want to get to. And that is where this technology that I talked about earlier, this is where this comes in. Because this is an extraordinary technology. What makes it extraordinary is that it helps to bring the mind and body into their natural synergy, and it thereby unlocks potential that is otherwise difficult to unlock. And it does it without any medicines, any drugs, any substances, any supplements, any external frequencies. It actually adds nothing to the body. It adds nothing at all to the body, but it brings that harmony and that balance back. That's what makes it so extraordinary. The technology was developed by this gentleman. His name is Jay Dhaliwal, and he's the CEO and founder of a company called the Super Patch Company. And what it's doing is introducing a brand new paradigm of complete drug-free wellness, and how it's doing that is enhancing the function of your body by bringing the mind and the body back into its natural balance without adding anything to the body. Now, this, for some people, it's hard for them to wrap their mind around this. I'm going to show you just a 2-minute video of where he's doing an EEG experiment to show how the technology works. And then after that, I'm going to just explain how it's possible that something that doesn't add anything to your body does this, and how we can benefit from it, and then we'll come to a close.
Hi everyone, I'm Jay Dhaliwal. I'm the CEO and founder of Vox Life and the creator of Vox Life HPT. Today, I want to talk to you about a Harmony Neuro Patch. And what this product does is actually stimulates receptors on our skin, sending a neurosignal to our brain to help it reach homeostasis. This is the only product in the world that relies on the neurohaptic system that every single one of us has to optimize our neurology and optimize our health. Today, with the help of Dr. Mark DeBrinket, our VP of Clinical Strategy, we're going to be using an FDA-cleared 19-channel EEG headset, as well as FDA-cleared software to visualize, record, and show the impact that our technology has on our neurology and our brains to help it reach optimal performance. What we want to show today is how the Harmony Neuro Patch helps that dysregulated yellow, blue, and red colors in the brain maps transform into that healthy green homeostasis neurology that is the foundation of health and wellness. So what we're looking at right now is a neurological QEEG output of Mike's limbic system. The 19 channels are reading over 60,000 brainwaves a second and generating an output of neurofunction and brainwaves. What we want to see now is where that suboptimal red and yellow colors are. We want to see them turning as much as possible to a healthy green with the application of our HPT patch. So we've applied the patch now to Mike's arm, And within 10 seconds, you're seeing that predominant yellow and red become predominantly green. Just for clarification, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing in the world that has this output at this rate of speed without drugs, without chemicals, without electricity. That's the power of Vox HPT. So when we see a healthy green neurology, what we're looking at is a brain and a mind in homeostasis. It is operating in its optimal function. And this is so important. And this is why it's so important. So Vox Life HPT, as we demonstrated with our neuropatch, helps the central nervous system reach homeostasis in our neurology. And the reason this is so important for overall wellness and health is that neurology is the top of the pyramid of our physiological health and wellness paradigm. First is neurology at the very top, then there's chemistry, then there's biology, then there's physics and mechanics. Neurology will have an impact all the way through our entire physiology. Healthy neurology, healthy body, better wellness.
So the simplicity of the technology is really based on Nobel Prize science that goes back to the 1930s and 40s, where it was discovered that every cell in the human body transmits and receives electromagnetic signals. That's important. Many of us might not be aware of it, but of course, we have knowledge that we can all access to verify this. But understand that every cell in the human body transmits and receives electromagnetic signals. There's a lot of what that can mean, but just for this evening's purposes, that's one. The other piece of Nobel Prize science that came together to make this technology possible was in the early 2000s, there were two other Nobel Prize laureates that discovered that anything that touches the skin, this is not what, anything that touches the skin sends a signal to the brain. That's not what they discovered. That was always known. But what they discovered is that the sensory neurons in the skin that can detect anything that touches the skin sends a signal to the brain, which is the only way we know something is even touching us. But they discovered that inside of those sensory neurons are what they call ion channels, which detects not just the touch, but it detects the vibration of what is touching the skin. And it reads that vibration and it sends that vibration is sent to the brain. What Superpat discovered is that over years of neuroscience research and development, that different patterns that touch the skin will send a different signal to the brain. And they learned that if one area of the brain is out of balance in its signals and harmony, therefore it will cause the body to be out of balance in that area. They have learned that what pattern will send a signal to bring that area back to balance. And so all it is that the patches carries a tactile pattern on it, a pattern engraved on it, and that pattern, when it touches the skin, sends an appropriate signal to bring a particular neural network into balance. The one that you just saw demonstrated, the Liberty patch, it brings the brain and the hemisphere of the whole brain into its coherent and balance. That demonstration you just saw was bringing a restless mind, a mind that is very restless and chaotic, back into more orderly function. And so what Simple Patch is doing is working with what you see here. We know that there are 5 levels of brain waves. Well, actually, neuroscience is now going beyond this. But these general 5 levels of brain waves that detect our state of mind, this is what the patches are doing. They're bringing these into order. They're bringing them back into their natural balance, because what throws our brain waves out of balance? Our brain waves are a reflection of our state of mind. What throws them into a chaotic state is what we call stress, our patterns of thinking, our emotional responses, and it's making the signals chaotic and out of balance. Our way of thinking, our mindsets, the way we are engaging in life by what we are thinking and how we are interpreting that. This brings it into balance. Well, that's very important, because if we can bring our brainwaves into harmony and balance, and we can maintain it long enough, guess what happens? The mind, through a phenomenon called neuroplasticity, which the brain is always engaged in neuroplasticity, which is rewiring and reforming itself, the brain starts to rewire itself to these new balances. And that becomes really life transformative. A way how to understand it is that with the understanding that super patches, they're not interacting with anything in your body. They're just working at the control center. They're bringing the brain into its balance. And because the brain and the mind controls everything in the body naturally begins to function much better. And an easy way to understand it is think about a pattern that's on a QR code. A QR code is just an arrangement of a pattern that if you point a camera at it, the camera is going to convert that visual signal into a digital signal and it unlocks the information that's on it. In a very similar way, super patches only have a tactile pattern that's on them, it's engraved on them. And these specialized ionic receptors in the skin, they detect the vibration of the pattern, sends a neural signal to the brain that synchronizes the brain waves, and it resets them back to their optimal state. What does that mean? You get optimal performance with mind and optimal performance with body. This is something that has never existed before in the wellness space. There's no other technology that actually works like this, that without adding anything to your body, it's actually harnessing the technology of how we're actually designed. It's just reconnecting it so that it can function properly the way it's designed because our way of living has disrupted it. And that's interesting. So it's called vibrotactile, meaning vibration through touch, vibrotactile technology. And over 17 years now of its research and development, it is now peer-reviewed and published research over the last few years, and it's now published in major medical journals around the world. In addition to that, it is now gaining more global recognition because it's now being presented at major medical symposiums that also peer review it through their own scientific authorities. And it has never been seen before where you're getting this type of physical and mental enhancements without actually adding anything to the body. Ladies and gentlemen, I want us to understand that this is tapping into the regenerative and natural intelligence that streams from inside out, that goes from invisible into form, from mind to body. It's a natural flow, but it gets distorted and it gets disordered, it gets thrown out of balance by our state of mind. So here now we have a bridge that supports the process of alignment while we're also supporting the process of improving our physical and mental health. To date, they have developed 13 revolutionary targeted solutions that's designed to enhance our health, wellness, and performance. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I really want to encourage you to look at it because my 25 years of clinical practice, I've worked with all type of modalities, all type of different medicines that's in the natural space, but I've not come across anything that is as clean and is as potent and as profound and as impactful as these patches. The one called peace, which is for stress, if you are feeling stressed and you're feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling anxious and you just apply the peace patch within a matter of moments because they begin to work immediately. Within a matter of moments, you start to feel centered. You start to feel that calmness. It shifts your nervous system from sympathetic dominance and it shifts it back to parasympathetic, where you start to feel more peace and more calm. Sleep, I want to say this to us. People underestimate the value of sleep. Sleep is perhaps the most important pillar in our entire health regime. More than anything else, sleep is at the top. And people think because they sleep through the night that they may have gotten a good night's sleep. Sleep is where the brain cleans itself, repairs itself, regenerates itself, and the entire body does the same when sleep is at REM level. Most of us don't get REM sleep for very long. And so, and there is nothing in the world that makes you sleep at that level that's natural. So, sleeping aids don't do it. It doesn't matter if it's a natural thing like melatonin or a pharmaceutical. The only thing that resets your sleep cycle to put you at that level is you have to reset the circadian rhythms of the brain to naturally function the way it's supposed to. And that's what the REM does. The one you saw demonstrated was liberty, and it says mobility. It brings the brain into balance and harmony, but in a way that it increases your strength, your stability, and your balance in a matter of seconds. In fact, there's a test that we can do to check your balance and stability and your strength before and after, and you'll see within a matter of seconds there's a 33% increase in your strength, stability, and balance. Whether it be pain, immune function, this defend is an amazing thing for your immune system. Athletic performance, you can also do the balance and stability test with that. You want clean energy on demand with alertness, without any of those chemicals of these energy drinks. Boost is what you need. For your moods, you're feeling low, you're feeling a bit depressed. This will help to bring you out of that. You want focus, you want concentration, you want to be sharp. Focus, healthy skin, metabolism. You're dealing with addictions, not just substances or foods or whatever, but mental addictions. We're addicted to ways of thinking, patterns of thinking, overthinking, worrying. We're addicted to social media. Addictions that you find that you want to get away from it, but you find it difficult to break. This deals with the emotional centers of the brain that helps us that anchors us into these habits and helps us to be able to break free. And then there's one for male passion. So these are mind-body solutions that we all need that enhances physical and mental well-being. They're FDA registered, not FDA approved, because FDA approval is only needed for substances that are ingested into the body, but these are regulated as being safe for human use. They have no contraindications because there's nothing to interact with your body, so there's no side effects, there is no interactions, there's no allergic reactions, things like that. And it is safe for children. You have a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old that has allergies, that's feeling sick, that has you put on the defend patch. They're effective and they work almost immediately. These are tested, they're proven, and they're actually quite affordable. One of the beauties of super patches is that as we look and journey into alignment, as we begin to work on reorienting our minds, when we combine the patches, when they're synchronized, the more the brain is in sync, the greater the rhythm of the flow between our mind and body, and that really enhances and upregulates and coordinates the way our whole mind and body is working, and it really is transformative. And so when you combine them together, it actually becomes quite amazing to do that. So to conclude, this is a technology that becomes a bridge. It is very profound. Just through the power of touch, we can begin to realign our mind and body in a way by bringing our brains into more orderly functioning. And the brain now begins to, and this is provided we remain consistent over time using it and allow the brain to begin to rewire itself according, it now becomes transformative. So the skin delivers just a specific neural signal according to the pattern of each patch, and it guides the brain to healthier states. The signals sync with the regenerative intelligence of the body's operating system, and it enhances that mind-body synergy. This signaling creates the optimal environment for rapid neurological alignment. They start to work in seconds. And it makes mindset shifts more natural and accessible. That, to me, is one of the biggest values of the patch, that it makes shift, because let me tell you, to start to renew your mind and your thinking, to shift mindsets away from old patterns is not as simple as it seems, but it makes it more accessible. And so as we begin to want to engage new habits, new ways of thinking, breaking this conflicting way of living where we're fractured in ourselves, as we begin to try to install the new apps, which is, we can call it, I call them the transforming apps, which are just new practices, installing new ways of thinking, removing the old. As we begin to engage that, we want to update the operating system, kind of like our phones. You want to install some new apps that are going to require some more um, power. You want to make sure that the operating system is upgraded so that it can handle the apps. Well, super patches become the upgrading of the operating system so that we can now run these new mind renewal apps more efficiently. Super patches, when it comes into real world application in terms of compliance, in terms of making sure that everything is efficient within the field of operation for us, they work along with the research and development. And so we have that behind us to ensure that what we have maintains its quality and its standard. So I want to encourage you to look at enhancing your well-being in a way that it might not have been possible before with one, looking at our programs, looking at our workshops, looking at how we can learn to get aligned. But what helps to support this process is Superpatch. And since the mind is the access for our experiences of life, then Superpatches are our strategic support towards living a much better life. And so the question might come up, do I have to use these for the rest of my life? Well, that is a yes and no question because depending on what a person might be dealing with in their own life situation, but it will become where you may not need to do that, but it comes down to just one base. In fact, let me just do it this way and I'll explain it in a minute. Um, I want to encourage you to join our Global Super Patch community. Um, we have a Facebook page where it has literally thousands of testimonies from people all over the world and how these patches are impacting their lives and changing their whole position in things. So to be able to become part of our community, it's as simple as becoming a member, and it's a one-time cost of $40. Oh, I did not change. Um, anyway, this gives you access to wholesale pricing. And once you get access to wholesale pricing, we recommend that you begin with what we call a Flex 4 starter pack. This 175 includes that one-time $40 membership, and it gives you three of the technologies and a one free. So it could be any four of your choice, but you're buying three and they're giving you one free. And here's it. If you think that there's no particular issue that you have as it comes to the question of, do I need to use these for the rest of my life? I recommend to people that when you use the liberty, the peace, and the defend, when you bring your brain and your mind into harmony and balance, when you have your nervous system in order on the parasympathetic dominance and your immune system, which your body needs for everything in order to keep everything in order, when you have those and you use those, you are now this is your now life assurance. Your systems are more efficient. Your metabolism is more efficient. Your mind and body is in more harmony. Your nutrition is now being better utilized. Everything is now functioning better. You're aging more gracefully. You're not accelerating your aging process as we are doing every day, unknown to ourselves. This is the base, and I'm just saying that just in case you think, well, I don't really need these. I'm in good shape. You'd be surprised just taking these consistently, how much different you're going to feel and function. However, as part of our member of our community, just ignore that one. Last month, the company had an offer where it was $1 to become a member. Has gone. Oh, no, it's still available. I forgot. They extended it. So you can now become a member for $1. And so this is now 136 instead of 175, where you can now you get your three and you get your one free. As a member, you also have an option to become an entrepreneur with an economic program that Superpatch has developed. It's quite unique. It's where you can build a globally scalable business of your own. And the model is based on the principles of compound growth. Um, it give you an opportunity to want to build your personal well-being, to enhance your health, mentally and physically, while you can look at the opportunity of how you can now prepare yourself financially for the future, which is something that we all need to do because the world is changing, and we have not begun to see the ways in which it's going to change. Job security is no longer secured anymore. And so we do have to consider looking at options. For those of you who, if that resonates with you and you want to take a look at that and see what it's all about, what it offers, we look at the business concept and the potential. It's a more interactive session where you can get to ask any questions, including any questions about the technology. So that happens tomorrow evening at 6:30. You can speak to any of our partners that might have invited you on the call, or you can scan this QR code and you'll get the Zoom link to the meeting tomorrow where we talk about that. And so with that, I am going to say thank you very much for staying on, being here, taking the time and investing the time to learn what we talked about. I also invite you, if you want to, as part of our community, you get to join in our workshop programs, which helps us to be able to journey into our lives and live at a much higher level of existence. With that, I want to say good night to everyone. Have a wonderful week ahead of you. We look forward to see those of you who will be on the call tomorrow. And God bless you. Have a good night.